Welcome to the midweek mailbag special trade deadline edition. My name is Jeremy Reisman. I'm the producer of Pride of Detroit. You can find me at Detroit Online. With me to talk about Za'Darius Smith, and not only Za'Darius Smith, we'll talk about some other stuff as well, is the managing editor of Pride of Detroit, is at Erik Schlitt on Twitter. Erik Schlitt is here. How we doing, buddy?
Hey, happy trade day. I'm glad we were able to devote our entire focus to this trade deadline and nothing else going on in the entire world.
No. This is going to remain a Detroit Lions podcast, let's be clear, regardless of what else is going on in the world. But I think the way we'll approach this episode of the midweek mailbag is the first segment, all Za'Darius Smith, second segment, everything else.
Okay.
Because, I mean, listen, there are a lot of angles to take with this, and it's obviously pretty big news, even if we all saw this one coming, even if as early as Sunday it appeared the writing was on the wall with this. The Lions get it done. They trade for Za'Darius Smith. It costs them a 2025 fifth-round pick and a 2026 sixth-round pick, but they also get a 2026 seventh-round pick. So basically, it costs them a fifth round in the upcoming draft, and they swap a sixth and seventh for the year after that. All right. Do we want to give like quick overall thoughts, or do you want to jump into the questions?
Oh, it's up to you. I'm flexible. I mean, I'm always willing to talk on
Well,
encumbered.
Yeah.
So
I'll give you the floor because I feel like, I mean, I put my grade out there. I think we've talked about it a lot, right? Like, it's such a perfect fit. I would say that the price has been pretty reasonable, especially considering the reports out there that the Browns may have been seeking a fourth rounder and the Lions didn't give that up. And then the finances are perfect. I mean, it doesn't barely cost them anything this year, and they have an option if they want to keep him next year, but he could be off the books completely next year if they don't want him. So, yeah.
Or they could restructure.
Or they could restructure, for sure. Restructure, extend, whatever. But I rather hear your thoughts on it because I haven't heard much from you today. So what how you feeling?
Yeah, I'm feeling good. When Aiden got hurt and I wrote the 10 options article, it was very heavily Za'Darius Smith. I spent a lot of time talking about him as being the most realistic option, right? Like, from a schematic standpoint, athletic standpoint, veteran standpoint, he just provided everything that they needed. And then on top of that, you're talking low cost, low investment, and it made perfect sense. I thought I was onto something, and then come to find out there was a whole bunch of other people that were on that Za'Darius Smith train as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, oh, maybe I found a diamond in the rough. No, I mean, everybody kind of found that same logical conclusion, which I think also points to the fact that this made the most sense.
Yes.
Almost all the beat writers ended up with Za'Darius as the guy that they pointed to, and it's a perfect mesh of what they're trying to accomplish and value, right? Like, you don't want to give up. Brad doesn't want to give up first and second round picks. He really doesn't like to give up fourth round picks unless it's, third to fourth round picks, unless he feels like he's getting something like long term out of it. And then those picks after round 4, they're movable pieces for him, and he uses them to throw in to make deals for draft picks, for positioning, for players, and really I think that's the way Brad kind of looks at the whole thing. So the cost made perfect sense to me, and I think he'll do very well. Shouldn't take long to acclimate to the scheme. That veteran presence is really going to be incredibly valuable. And I know a lot of people are saying the question with him was he a product of having a good pass rusher on the opposite side?
Right.
And I look at it as he's going to be playing next to Aleem McNeil. And that's going to be a massive advantage. Like, it's not just, yes, there's going to be a presence on the other side, or maybe they'll add a tight end to chip him or a running back to chip him, but they're going to have to account for the person literally next to him, whether it's McNeil or DJ Reader. And so that's going to be a big advantage. Like, yes, teams would often double team Myles Garrett and leave leave Smith, one-on-one. I don't think that changes a ton just because of the Lions' interior presence.
Yeah.
So overall, made perfect sense.
And I think they also move him. He's movable all around, right? He can play on the interior. He can play on the left side. He can play on the right side. He can play standing
inside.
up. He can play with his fingers in the dirt. Like, the Lions are going to have options to move him all over if they are concerned about a specific matchup or a specific double team or weak side, strong side. They'll have options. And so I'm not that concerned about the double team stuff either. Plus, like, this is a guy who has had success everywhere he's gone. He was successful in Green Bay. He was successful for at least half of the season before he got injured in Minnesota. He's been successful in Cleveland, like with the Ravens, right? Like everywhere he's gone, he's seen success. And so I don't think we can say like, it's just Myles Garrett. And I understand he's at a certain point in his career where he's not at his peak, but to say that like suddenly he's lost it all and he's only benefiting from Myles Garrett scraps is a highly, highly disingenuous argument.
I agree with that. So if you look back at his history and you look where he's got his production this year, most of it's been on the left side.
Yep.
And that is typically where Josh Pascal has been playing. But one of the things that we've been kind of paying attention to since the bye and since they have, how they've adjusted their defense without Aiden is I've started to notice like a shift, right? Instead of having that kind of heavy end on the left side, they slowly started incorporating that kind of heavy end on the right side. If you'll notice, like James Houston, the majority of his snaps last week came at left defensive end. Right. So you have you're getting more lighter guys on that left side, and I think that was almost like a precursor into a let's start to shift how we're manipulating our front and where we're focusing it and how we're laying out the personnel, because with Aiden, it was very deliberate. You had him in one side on certain packages, him in another side in other packages, and they kind of had to just scrap all of that, and they had to just kind of go back to basics. And he fits in. I think Za'Darius fits in really well on that left side. You can have, because remember, like Levi's been on the right side for the last couple of weeks. And that's where I expect Pascal to come back, and I expect him to kind of play that side. And if Pascal's not ready, I expect Levi to kind of play that side. And so I don't think it's going to be a big transition for Smith. They're just going to, I think they plug him in at the left side. But when you shift guys, like he's shiftable, like you were just alluding to, right? Like he plays snaps on the right, and that's going to happen. They're going to move the guys depending on how the offense sets up and stuff. But I think the majority of his snaps are probably going to be on the left side. That seems to be where he's most comfortable, and it fits in well with what the Lions have done post Hutchinson, post bye.
All right, let's get into some of these questions here. Football Guy on Twitter asks, everyone is happy about Z because of his pass rushing skills. What else does he bring to the table in terms of strengths on defenses? What about his weaknesses?
I mean, the strengths are he's also a terrific run stuffer, right? Yeah. He can set the edge as well as anyone. He plays with power. He, like I said, it's a perfect schematic fit for what they're looking for. He has length. He has the ability to pass rush. He has the ability to stunt with the defensive tackles. He has the ability to push inside on third downs if they want to bring more Sam looks in and bring that Sam down to the line of scrimmage. He can push inside, and you can bring a Levi outside and stuff like that. So positional flexibility, flexibility within all the concepts that the Lions like to run with their front. He fits all of them really to a T. So, he's getting older, so the explosion isn't quite what it was. But I think he'll actually fit better in this scheme than he has in some of the previous schemes we've seen him operate out of in his, his last half decade in the NFL.
Yeah, I think his game. I think another aspect of his game is his relentlessness. He's not a guy that's going to dog it. He's not a guy that's going to, walk off the sidelines in the middle of a play. Chicago Bears. But I just like everything to me is checking all the boxes of what they want in this position, what they want out of, like a culture in terms of like just the like he's a Dan Campbell guy, no question about it. But you mentioned it there. Like I think the age is the biggest weakness at this point, right? He's not going to be super fast. Even, I mean, his athletic profile in general was not like he's not the quickest guy off the snap. He's not a guy that's going to bend the edge. He's not a guy that has a wide variety of like speed pass rush moves, but he has some pass rush moves, and he's a veteran, and he knows he's savvy, I would say too, in his counter move. So, but yeah, like this, this isn't a Myles Garrett. This isn't a TJ Watt. You're not going to get 10 sacks out of this guy in the final 9 games of the season or whatever, but you're going to get a guy who's mostly assignment sound. You're going to get a guy who's going to crush the pocket and hopefully allow either himself or someone else to get a pressure, to affect the pass, to get to the quarterback. And that's what they've been missing for the past 3 weeks.
Yeah, he in so many ways, he's the perfect candidate for the Lions because he gives you stylistically everything you want, yet you didn't sacrifice your future in order to get him. And that's, I think, the big difference, right? Like if you were to go get one of those big impact guys, you would have been sacrificing a big part of your future. And you can now level up your ability to make a Super Bowl run now, and you haven't really cost yourself anything as far as future building.
Well, we just talked about how Za'Darius Smith can stop the run. I made this font too small. Det Lions asks,
Yes.
Is the Hutchinson injury a bigger problem for the pass rush or run defense? Last 3 weeks, the Lions defense have given up 145 rushing yards per game, 5.7 yards per carry, a stark difference from the previous 5 games, 83 yards per game, 4.2 yards per carry. I mean, I do think it's probably an understated concern. After the Hutchinson injury, like everyone focuses, like the Lions need a pass rusher. The Lions need a pass rusher. I think we've been saying for the last couple weeks, like, look at the run defense. That's not very good either. But maybe it's not being spoken enough nationally. So, I mean, to me, like it's kind of irrelevant which one's a bigger problem. They were both problems, and I think they're both kind of addressed here. But I guess let's talk about the run defense. Like Za'Darius Smith helps. Does he help enough?
Yeah, I think he should, right? They've been getting gashed on a couple of big plays, mostly because their practice squad defensive ends have been getting pinched in and they haven't been able to hold the edge. That's been a big part of it. And so if you now add a guy who can hold the edge and do what they want to do with it, it's a big difference. It should make a pretty drastic difference. Now, I think anytime you're going to lose a player at Aiden's level, you're of course going to see a drop off, right?
Yep.
And teams are starting to try and establish the run more for a couple of reasons. One, they're trying to keep their defense rested because the Lions are long driving these teams and they're scoring like 30 points, right? And so their teams are trying to get the run going against the Lions so that they can kind of like hang in there and try and slow the game down, right? So that it doesn't become this shootout that then the run game just goes away, because that plays to the Lions' favor as well. So, yes, he should help the run. I still think Aiden's biggest loss is as a pass rusher, though.
Sure.
Because
he was incredible.
He was, yeah. I mean, like he was producing over half, like 60, 70, like 60%, I'd say probably of their production.
Yeah.
In the pass rushing department. And that's not replaceable, right? Like, and you at his best, Za'Darius isn't going to get close to that, right? So the run defense saw a little bit of a drop. The pass rush saw a much larger drop when Aiden was gone. And I think Za'Darius's impact can be felt in both areas, but I believe you'll feel it more in that run defense. So yeah, to go back to that question, I still think it's a pass rush loss from Aiden's pass rush is really what's going to be felt the most.
I agree, but I do want to go back to the run defense a little bit here.
Okay.
Because I guess I'm not as convinced this is going to be enough of a help because, I mean, if we're being completely honest, yes, some of the run issues have been on the edges, but not all of them. And I think the Lions have uncharacteristically been beaten between the tackles in ways that we did not see last year at all. And really for the first 3 or 4 games this year either. I think there's at least a moderate to decent concern about the defensive tackle depth.
So let me talk about that first, because the first thing is your primary defensive tackle depth has had to play on the edge because of this loss. So now if you get Pascal healthy and you get Za'Darius, you now get Levi back inside, and that's going to help. So you should see an incremental. The addition of Za'Darius should help the edge, but it should also have that trickle down effect into the depth of the interior as well. If you can get Broderick Martin back in the next couple of weeks, now you can but
counting on him to play good is still very much
you're
a question.
Counting on him to try and be Kyle Pecco, because I feel like him and Pecco.
But that's a step up. I think that's a significant step up from what we've seen out of him so far. Broderick Martin has not played well.
Mm-hmm. I feel like they were, by the end of training camp, they were closer to neck and neck. But I do think Pecco was ahead. But I do think Martin was getting closer.
Sure.
We'll have to see it.
Yeah, but I mean, he hasn't practiced in a month, 2 months.
But even the addition of him is the opportunity to add more depth, right? Because right now you're playing Pat O'Connor, who was drafted as a defensive end, plays mostly as a defensive end. He's now doing backup nose tackle snaps. If you start getting these guys healthier and you start adding layers to that interior, and then you start adding guys on the edge that can be a little bit more stout, those things should cumulatively positively affect the run defense.
That's true. And listen, like, you hope Broderick Martin comes along so that he's hitting his stride in January, right? You hope Mekhi Wingo had some, and you know, it's his rookie year. He's going to get better as the season goes on. You hope Levi maybe settles back into a 3 to 5 tech instead of a 5 to 9. But we'll see. But that's under the assumption that everyone stays healthy currently, and everyone gets healthier, which is not typically how an NFL season works. You don't get healthier as it goes on. So we'll see. To me, there's still a relatively large concern there that isn't completely settled with the Za'Darius Smith trade. But let's move on to the next question here. We're going to skip Daniel G's. How does the Smith trade shuffle the mix for the rest of the defensive line? Because I feel like we've kind of talked all about that. Though he does ask, is James Houston on his way out? I certainly think this pushes him down the depth chart. It could push him back to a game day inactive, particularly if they get back Pascal, if they get back Wingo. Then it's just then it becomes a numbers game, and I would not be surprised to see Houston become a game day inactive if we get to that point.
The trick is Ukwu and Muhammad both have used up 2 of their 3 elevations, and so they only have 1 left each, and so it's a numbers game in James Houston's favor as well.
Sure.
Unless they're looking at him and saying, we're going to cut you and elevate one of those guys, then he's going to get his shots. There are going to be times when he's going to be, I think, a game day inactive, and there's going to be times when he's edge 4 or edge 3, right? I think we saw last week Thomas struggled after having a good first week from Isaiah Thomas 2 weeks ago. Last week he struggled a little bit more. Houston got a lot more opportunities, and so it's possible he stays in that element. But getting Pascal back, but getting Wingo back, all those things certainly are going to challenge his opportunities.
All right, next question comes from Coach Steve on Twitter. Says, Texas O-line looks not great. How much do you think that plays into the number of snaps Za'Darius Smith might get on Sunday night? Yeah, it's a good thing to ask, because that was kind of the first thing that came to my mind. Is like, oh, I watched this Texans team on Thursday night. The Jets were just kind of like tearing up. That left guard situation is a mess, and the guy that they started in that game, I believe, is on IR now. It's kind of a mess. I looked at some early stats. The Texans are 28th in pass block win rate, 28th in run block win rate. Now, we still have to see if Za'Darius Smith is going to get acclimated in time to even play this week, but Dan Campbell was asked, I think, about 2 weeks ago, is that a position where you can just plug and play? You can just get this guy going and bring him in and get him going immediately. And he said, yeah, that's the hope. Like, if we're going to make a move at the trade deadline, that's kind of the idea there, because, listen, I mean, we're paying for a half a season here, maybe more. Mm-hmm. You want to get the most out of that. And so,
sure.
And this is a veteran, a guy in his 10th season. He's 32 years old. I tend to think you could potentially just give him a full load. I'm not sure if they're going to do that. It's not necessarily the Lions' MO, but this is also kind of unique. They haven't really made a veteran starter midseason trade like this, so it's a little bit of uncharted territory, but I would not be surprised, one, if he's starting on Sunday, two, if he plays, 50% of the snaps, 60% of the snaps.
Yeah, I fully expect him to play. The way Houston's line is set up is they have two good offensive tackles, and then the interior is just a disaster. They actually have decent players. They're just playing like garbage. Their first round pick, I don't know if he went to IR, but I know he was expected to miss multiple weeks.
Yeah.
Their backup is not good either. So that left guard spot is a massive weakness for them. Their center hasn't been playing great. Their right guard hasn't been playing great. And so I expect if he plays, he is going to, again, garner some attention from those tackles, and they're going to have less opportunity to help out. He can also, you can kick him inside and try and get an athleticism advantage on these guards as well, and see if you can eat that way. So I do expect him to pick up enough quickly, and I don't think you're going to get anything exotic out of that front, but I think it's the way the Lions run their defense. I don't think he should have any difficulty being ready by the end of the week. By
the way, Kendrick Green is scheduled to start at the left guard position. His pass block grade this season, 4.3.
Yeah, and the starter was arguably worse than him.
Yeah.
Kenyon Green, who was a first rounder back in 2022, and has just been a disaster. I mean, Shaq Mason. Remember, Shaq Mason was like great a couple years ago, all pro. He's been average to below average. Juice Scruggs was a second round pick as well. Their center has not been playing well. To add some more context, they've allowed 151 pressures according to Next Gen Stats. That's the most in the NFL. Pressure rate, allow a pressure on 41% of their dropbacks. So he's getting pressured almost at once out of every two times he drops, right? They've allowed 31 sacks.
This is a Lee McNeil eating.
Yeah, second most in the NFL. So you're talking like just a lot. And then I was watching the Texans with my daughter, trying to give her some daddy-daughter time before the show here. And Stroud fumbled, and she goes, "Uh-oh, he dropped the football. That's a bad choice." I'm like, yeah, he makes a couple of those bad choices.
Yeah, a little bit here and there.
Settle in, little girl.
All right, last question before we go to our first break from Sugar Bear. Asks, seems less edge players were on the move than originally thought. Given that, is it at all disappointing the Lions only got one guy, or should we just celebrate that they got a damn good player? Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that, because there are a lot of other names out there that I think the Lions fans were eyeing and maybe even hoping that a second move made. Arden Key was one. Ojulari, Giants was another one. There are plenty of other guys out there too, but basically no one else got traded. And to me, I was like, get me Za'Darius and I'm cool. In an ideal world, would the Lions added more guys? Sure. Do they need more depth on the edge? Probably. But we're nitpicking at this point because the Lions, I think Pascal and Za'Darius is a fine starting duo, and if you have your other guys involved too, and Levi and whoever else is in the plans, Mohammed, if you bring him up to the 53, like that's not terrible, that's fine. But my overall point here is that not only did none of those other guys get traded, but there was a pretty robust edge market in terms of buyers from what we've heard, right? We heard Atlanta was in on Za'Darius Smith. We've heard that the Packers were maybe in on Ojulari or interested in Ojulari. And I mean, you watched the Packers last week. Their pass rush sucks, and they traded away Preston Smith. Not that Smith was good, he has not been playing well, but like they have less depth now at a position that they were already weak in. So I think it's realistic to look at what happened today and be like, the Lions made out like bandits. Let's not get greedy here.
Yeah, I think as often is the case, we get the idea in our head that guys are available that maybe aren't.
Right.
And we're like, oh, I'd love to get him. Well, he's not available. I'd love to get him. Well, he's not available. Like we have these 3-4 guys that we think are pie in the sky guys, but they're really not available. And then you get GMs that completely overvalue their players, like Ojulari, and they're like, oh, I want a 3rd rounder for him or whatever he was looking for. Right. And then everybody's like, yeah, no, I'll sign him in 6 months when he doesn't re-sign with you because you're a garbage organization.
This is you throwing more shade at the Giants front office.
They're so bad. They're so bad. Like there's no reason why they shouldn't have been able to trade him. They are not in a position to where they shouldn't have been sellers. They have this opportunity. They're not going to be able to get this guy back, especially with the investments that they've made, last offseason at the edge. They could have gotten something. They got greedy and they got left holding the bag, and they're going to use this kid's going to run out his rookie contract, and then see you later. You get nothing. No, good job.
And for my best John Lovitz impression from The Wedding Singer, the Lions are reaping all the benefits because he doesn't go to a contender in the NFC, right? He doesn't go to Atlanta. Yeah. He doesn't go to Green Bay. And I think that was also kind of an overall win for the day for the Lions. Like, the NFC did not get all that much better. Washington obviously made a move, getting Marshawn Lattimore, but the NFC got worse. The Packers and the Bears sold. And again, like, not that Preston Smith was making, a ton of progress there, and neither was I almost said Khalil Dorsey, the running back.
Herbert.
Khalil Herbert, thank you.
Yeah. Why they sold him, I don't know, because they need we already got a good running back in DeAndre Swift. It says here
he's pretty durable, I hear.
Great, be the Bears. Keep being the Bears. I'm fine with that.
Anyways, all right, let's call it there. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to start talking about things that aren't trade deadline related when we come back here on the Midweek Mailbag. We'll be right back. All right, we are back.
I don't know why they sold him. That was dumb.
Have they been playing him at all? Like, he's not getting that many touches, though, is he?
No, but there's so many teams that are like, oh, we have a starting running back, so therefore we can trade our backup. Or you can be like, oh, we have 2 good running backs and we use them both, and look how we have the best offense in the league.
They have Roschon, though, too.
Okay.
Roschon has more carries than he does. Khalil Herbert has 8 carries this season.
Yeah, their coaching staff is stupid.
No, they like Roschon Johnson better. This is like trading. I was going to say Sione Vaki, but I don't want to hurt your feelings, and plus he's a rookie. It's like trading Jamar Jefferson.
I almost look. What they get for like a 7th or something like that?
Something like that.
I would have given a 7th for him. He's a good back.
Well, that is the also funnier part of both the Bears and the Packers being sellers is they got nothing. They both got 7th rounders. Like, they got nothing. Yeah. They just gave away a player.
Right.
All right, let me get to some alerts here. I am a little bit
Yes.
disappointed that the donation alert didn't go off because after Sunday stream, I just had my streaming software still up. It wasn't, we obviously weren't streaming at the time. And then all of the donation alerts came in at once when we were off air. I'm like, oh, maybe it just like needed to kick in, but I don't know what they're delayed. Like they're happening, but they're extremely delayed. So I am keeping track of all the donations that did come in, and we'll get to that one in a second. Let me get through some of the Twitch and YouTube alerts first. Culver Hibbs, thank you for the follow on Twitch. I am Grit, thank you for the follow on Twitch. Siggy, thank you for the 4 months subscribed on Twitch. Texas Wolverine, 30 months subscribed on Twitch, says 30 months. You guys are great. Any word on when and if we can expect Pascal, Kamish, and Hutch back? Yeah, let's talk about it real quick, because Pascal, I think Dan said at the end of last week, we're hopeful to have him back next week, so this week. Kamish, I didn't see this until late last week. Justin Rogers of the Detroit Football Network says he is not going to be ready by the end of the regular season. They're hopeful he's a guy that returns in the playoffs. So that kind of like, when I saw that kind of pushed me a little bit towards like, okay, if they get a second edge, I'll be okay with that. I didn't think it was necessary, but part of me was hoping like, oh, Kamish comes back in December for a month before we get to the playoffs. Like that's good enough. That's worth a guy that you can get for a 7th round pick, but sounds like it's going to be a while, and I would say not even guaranteed that he comes back. I mean, if he can't be ready until the playoffs, is he even going to be effective in the playoffs, right? He's not going to be practicing for 5 months almost. So, and then Hutch, I don't know, man. I really don't.
It's a good story that he'll be ready for
it would
the
be
Super
an
Bowl.
awesome story if he was ready for the Super Bowl. I think that's all that is. I think that's the Hutchinson crew dangling a carrot in front of Aiden, be like, hey, you never know.
No, you know what they are? They are great marketers. That family, the Hutchinson at Hutchinson.inc or whatever they are. They are great marketers.
And when they
when they left that open, now people are going to talk about it for the whole season,
right.
And you're constantly going to be in his.
And I mean, like, if the Lions make the Super Bowl,
marketing play,
and there's that 2 weeks in between the conference championship game and the Super Bowl, like, it's all going to be like, is Aiden Hutchinson playing? Is Aiden Hutchinson going to play?
100%. And you know what's going to happen is, even if he's not ready, he's going to start practicing. He's going to be like, just start my clock. It's not going to hurt you anything to start my clock. Just start my clock. And
someone DM'd me this question on Twitter, and I did a little research and I completely forgot of a new rule. They're like, hey, are they going to save one of their 8 IR to return spots for
You don't need to for the playoffs anymore, right?
There's a new rule that you can return an infinite amount of players from IR during the postseason.
Maybe that's their plan. They're just going to bring Kaminsky, Mosley, Hutch, just bring them all back right in the playoffs.
That's right. But yeah, I'd forgotten. And if I'm not mistaken, I wasn't 100% sure on this, and I couldn't really find a quick answer. I think the Lions may have proposed that rule.
I believe they did.
Yeah, which is kind of a funny happenstance of it. Yukon Lions fan, 7 months subscribed to the channel. Thank you so much. All right, we got a couple donations in. Let's talk about them. Matthew C., a $250 donation, says, lost my godmother to cancer yesterday. Oh my God.
Oh my gosh.
So shout out her, shout out y'all. Fuck cancer, go Lions. Man, I'm sorry to hear that. That's terrible. Yeah. Oh, I thought that was the alert. I really appreciate the donation. If you guys don't know, we haven't really mentioned it on the stream. We're raising money all month for the Rogel Cancer Center at the University of Michigan. Basically, they do a ton of research. They do care there as well. They're one of the cutting edge places in Michigan, rated number 1 cancer center in Michigan by the U.S. Department of Health or something. I should really learn exactly what that is. But either way, I've talked to the people that work there, that are in charge of fundraising there, and I'm inspired by the stories that they tell me and everything that they do over there. During this entire time too, you guys can do silly stuff to us as well. Go to pridetrade.com and look for our logo with a mustache on it, and it tells you what you can do with your donations, like a $300 donation, and we'll crack an egg on our head, a $50 donation, or a $25 donation, and I'll write something on my face of your choosing as long as it's appropriate. $50 will either mute or make one of us do ASMR. Whole bunch of, and then we'll also do giveaways throughout the month. Every $1,000 that we raise, I'm going to spin what we call the Wheel of Pain, which looks like this. Boop. Oh, there it is. Whoop. Oh, don't move that. Spin wheel. Up downs, eating bugs, drinking pickle juice, eating Vegemite, which I still haven't done yet. And then we'll do giveaways throughout the month as well. There are some bigger goals we're trying to hit. We hit one already at 5,000, which means we're going to celebrate what we're calling Flea Flicker Day, where I'm going to be forced to watch a bunch of flea flickers and then play a game of Madden where I'm just calling flea flickers. So that's going to be terrible. If we get to 10,000, our next goal, I'm going to have to do an entire apology video explaining why running backs do matter. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff after that, including me getting an actual tattoo, me shaving my head, me catching punts from Jack Fox.
That's like a reward. That's a reward. Although I've seen you catch punts.
I was going to say, I'm going to embarrass myself 100%. I am looking forward to it if we get there. But I'm also not looking forward to it being videoed and streamed. I talked a little bit with Eamon, the PR director there, and he had some ideas for it. I was like, I was just going to stream it live from my phone. He's like, we can get our video crew in there if you want and like make an actual video of it. I'm like, oh,
nice. Neil will do it.
Fun. So
Neil will cut it and slow mo it. Neil
right.
kill that thing.
My goal is just not to have my butt crack out this time. That's my goal.
Fingers crossed for all of us. I was there. I remember.
I was there. $100 donation from Alan P says, lost my dad to cancer 15 years ago. Keep up the great work, guys, and keep fighting the fight. Appreciate that, Alan. That's part of the reason why we chose this place, is because it is pervasive. So many people have had a loved one go through this, or know someone who doesn't have someone they know who they've lost to cancer. It's crazy. It seems to be getting worse, which is why it's important for places like this, because as I've told in my story already several times, when my dad was diagnosed in 2002, he had 6 months to 2 years to live, and he survived another 15 because of the trial drugs and the care and just the experimental stuff that was available to the public because of places like the Rogo Cancer Center. So it's really important to me. I know it's important to a lot of you. It's important to an anonymous donor who just donated $10. Appreciate you. Okay. And I think we're caught up on alerts, which means we can answer some of your guys' questions. Oh, no, we're not caught up on alerts. Let me take that back, because Damian Smith over on YouTube, $5 super chat says, why hasn't the UFL been a good source of players other than kickers? Breland Speaks, the other UFL Defensive Player of the Year, is a free agent, for example.
I think it's really just a talent gap. There's not really a developmental league like you would see in other sports. And so the NFL has a de facto practice squad to basically use this like kind of like a developmental staging area. But any other NFL competitor doesn't work from a developmental standpoint. And so you're not cultivating these guys and trying to get them to learn your system and your scheme. And so, and then you end up having teams having to allocate spots for development. Look at this year. Lions have 3 offensive linemen that they're building because offensive line is huge, and it takes a long time for these guys to get ready. And so they're building those guys, but it's just a big talent gap. And when you have like these guys like competing against each other, like it looks like better version of college football because they are a slightly better, more
Right.
talent. They are still a more talented group of just the average college player, but they're still not at like the NFL echelon of talent. And so every once in a while, you'll see a guy come in and break out. But I mean, I think the perfect example is to look at Betts, uh, Canada's best player in the Canadian League, can't make the team, goes back to Canada, and he's getting 10 sacks and again or
No,
whatever it was.
he's
Oh, he's
actually
not
he's way less effective this season
really.
at the CFL.
He jumped right back in. He had like a couple sacks that first game. I thought he was on his way. I hadn't checked back in.
I don't
Canada.
think so. I thought
But-
I saw something today that
Okay.
well,
Well,
it wasn't happening.
I'll retract that part then. But
2 sacks so far.
okay, did they all come in the first game? Because I feel like he had 2 sacks in the first game back.
Maybe.
Um,
If I'm not gonna search too hard for a
No, it's
CFL
fine.
game log.
No, please don't. It was rhetorical. It's just I just think there's just
Yeah.
there's just a talent gap, and for the average like fan, like it's not always easy to see like the difference between them. But when you start comparing these guys like apples to apples next to each other on the same field, it's a lot easier to see. But when they're in separate leagues, it can be harder to ascertain the difference.
I would also say that like give it a little bit more time. These guys got 8 games to prove that they're NFL talent. And listen, like a lot of them got shots,
Sure.
right? A lot of them went out there and went
Sure.
to teams and had opportunities in training camp or are sitting on practice squads right now. Wait for more of that development to happen. Maybe they drop back to the UFL next year and get more of that development and are ready to take the jump after that. The other thing, though, I think, and you brought it up, and I think it's a point to kind of underline and highlight here, these guys are entering teams now with different schemes and different coaches. And I'm going to be straight honest. I think a lot of coaches don't have patience in developing their players. I think this is something that the Lions are phenomenal with. Their practice squad generally stays the same all year because they want to keep those guys and they want to build them and they want to eventually have them become someone like Trevor Nowaski, right? Like a guy who can step in and be okay. A lot of teams don't have that patience. So when they get a guy that they think is talented but doesn't click with their scheme or isn't great right away, they give up on him.
Yeah, and they don't have. I think that also they don't. Those coaches also don't have the luxury sometimes because they don't have the talent.
Yep.
Because they can't just
They're worried about their
lean on
jobs.
their top talent.
Yeah.
And they get the plug pulled on them so quick. You know what I mean? Like now, if you're not turning this team around in 2 years, you could be gone for a lot of organizations, which is why I think the way the Lions did it by saying, look, we're giving these guys 5-year contracts, take your time. They're going to come around. You know what I mean? Like that was a different way of looking at things. And people were shocked when they did that. They were like, oh,
Yeah.
I remember talking to a radio station ahead of the draft in Alabama or something. And they were like, when is this team going to be good? And I'm like, in 3 years, they'll be a playoff team. And they were like, oh my God, who has the patience for 3 years? And I'm like, that's the way they're set up. And it's rare, but we talk about teams wanting to emulate what the Lions do. That's part of it. You need patient ownership in order to let the people that you handpicked do their job.
It brings to question, like when the Lions start 2022 1-6, how many NFL franchises pull the plug right then and there?
A lot.
Right?
Jets.
Like if that happened, I was going to say, if that happened in New York, if that happened in a big market, like a huge market, Philly, New York, Dallas, I don't know if Dan Campbell sticks around and survives some of those markets. And it's an interesting conversation to have because I think back in the William Clay Ford days, some people criticized him for being too loyal, for sticking with people too long. And, obviously Matt Millen kind of comes to mind, right? So I mean,
Sure.
there is an argument to be made that like sometimes you have to realize when something isn't working, it's not working. But at the same time, when you are literally stripping things down to the foundation, like you had to when Matt Patricia was fired, you have to realize that that is not going to be a flip that's switched overnight. You have to at least give 2 full seasons. I would say in general 3, which is why I, when Matt Patricia took over, I was like, okay, like let's at least give him a 3rd season. Let's see what it looks like. I turned out to be wrong, and it's a different situation there because they didn't strip it down to the studs when they fired Caldwell. Like they were starting up here, and then they took it down for some reason, and then they had to build it back up. So I'm like, all right, well, if they're going to, I don't agree with what they did. Let me see it through. But it became pretty clear at the halfway through year 3 that there was no 8-2 finish around the corner there. So, anyways, that turned into a much larger conversation.
There's fans in Houston that are screaming about the offensive coordinator and wanting him.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'm like,
he was a head coaching candidate like 4 months ago.
Last year. Yeah. And now the Houston fans are like, not all of them, but I mean, I've seen articles and message boards and stuff like that have been like that they want him fired, and I'm like, my goodness.
Tennessee too. Like I thought the narrative around that Tennessee Titans team during Lions Week was really interesting because I think Dan even mentioned like they kind of remind us of us 3 years ago, where it's like,
well, they're
scrappy. They're hanging in these games. They're getting out to early leads, but they don't have the talent. Yet there's definitely an uproar of like, we fired our well-respected head coach for this guy, who's not getting anything done. The offense is bad. The
Raiders are going through the same thing.
Wow,
right?
Remember,
but I mean,
like,
yeah,
but yeah,
well, there's a lot of teams like that
for sure.
Have I talked about the Giants yet and what a disaster I think they're going to be?
Going to be or currently are?
Both. Going to be and it will be.
Do you think Dable gets fired this year? I know it's a little uncouth to talk about guys getting fired, but I've never really been a big Dable guy, and I'll admit part of that is
I don't know.
My own anti-Patriots tree bias.
Yeah, I don't know.
And you just think it's the front office. That's fine. You can say that.
I think no, I'm not a fan of him either, but I definitely think the front office is messed up.
Yeah,
like just they're arrogant and they don't understand value, and they're proving it over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
Yes, the Lions absolutely broke the Cowboys. Cowboys are done. That's what that game was. The Cowboys don't get to play anymore this year game. That's what that was.
Quirky Zerky, thank you for the 39 months. Subscribe to us on Twitch. That's 39 months. That's so much, Erik and Jeremy, and it's all been worth it. Hey, that's very nice. Appreciate you, Quirky. Caden, thank you for subscribing on YouTube. And Billy Shears, thank you for the follow on Twitch. All right. I think we're caught up.
I saw another question asking about Josh Pascal's injury. Pascal has what's being classified as an illness, which means it is a non-NFL related. I don't know. I guess it falls under the illness category because it's not an injury that happened during like an NFL situation.
Right.
And with him, it turns out it was something got flagged at one of his medical checkups, and they're trying to fix or correct that the issue that was flagged. It's a personal issue, that we don't know much about, and and people aren't going to ask about it because it's, again, a personal issue, but it's essentially something that he needs to correct from a health standpoint, and he is working towards doing that. The thought is it shouldn't take him terribly long to get it back to where it needs to be. And that's why most people are anticipating he returns this week, but there's always a chance that he doesn't.
Right. And the one thing when Pascal did talk to a reporter, Ben Raven of MLive, the important note he made is this is not the cancer coming back. That's not
correct.
What that is. Okay. Do you want to? I think we should jump back in. Unless there's
Okay.
I don't see a lot of questions coming in. And we're
Well,
up to
I feel like we missed a lot
that's very
earlier,
possible. If you got one, we can bring it in. I'm more than happy to answer some questions. I do have a relatively hard out at 9, but that's still
okay.
a ways away.
All right. Well, then we can go back to it if you have a hard out. No, we can go back and then we'll have more time at the end. That's fine.
Quirky wants to answer. Thoughts about the report that agents are telling QBs in college to go back and start for a couple seasons as NFL teams don't develop quarterbacks anymore?
That's always really been the issue, right? The hit rate on quarterbacks is so low. Even guys that you think are going to be like these revolutionary type players are now getting benched for 42-year-old fossils. And
I wonder who you could be talking about.
I'm just generalizing. But yeah, that's really, I honestly, unfortunately, it's nothing new. It all folds into the patience thing that we were just talking about. Right. The coaches need to win within a 2-year span. They can't afford to sit on their quarterback like they, because GMs aren't drafting quarterbacks in the first round and then sitting on them for 3 or 4 years anymore, like Jordan Love, right?
I was gonna say only Green Bay is still doing that, right? And maybe Atlanta.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, Atlanta, right? But it's again maybe 1 year, and then they're gonna be like, "Hey, we got to go to you." It makes sense for them to sit. At the same time, we have seen so many quarterbacks that were like, hey, you're in a conversation for a first overall pick, and then you go back to school and you just
it all falls apart.
And then you end up being Spencer Rattler. And so like I get
the difference now is though that you can get paid in college, right? Like that's the big difference.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I still don't think I fall on any specific side of like start your guy right away or sit him and let him develop. The thing is, whichever way you go, you have to stick with it. You have to see it out. Yeah. And that's the thing where obviously Anthony Richardson is the highlight of this debate. And reports are coming out that somebody
it's somebody new every year though. It just happens to be him right now.
Right. And with him, I don't know what to believe necessarily. I've seen some reports out there that said like, hey, they're not giving up on Anthony Richardson. They just think he would benefit from learning from the sidelines a little bit. And I can buy that at least a little bit because it certainly makes more sense to me than, hey, let's go win football games and try to make the playoffs with a fossilized quarterback. Like that doesn't make sense to me.
At the same time, what's the best way to learn?
But I mostly agree with that. But if he's continuing to just play bad, I think there is something to say of like, let's not kill this kid's confidence completely. Let's put him on the sidelines until we've got a better supporting cast around him, so we're not literally getting him killed out there.
I hear you. It all comes down to terrible coaching. Like if you have bad coaching, your quarterback is doomed.
Yeah,
it just is.
Well, and bad planning, right? Because I think part of the equation here too is, and why I thought the Chicago Bears were maybe getting on the right track is, if you're bringing in a rookie quarterback and you plan to play him, don't set him up to fail. Get an offensive line that can protect him. Get him weapons that he can throw to. Get him
the anti-Bryce Young plan.
Yes, exactly. Now it hasn't quite worked out in Chicago yet.
Well,
it's still very early, obviously, but
there's more going on there. That's not great.
True, and as I think we said during the POD cast, like part of the issue there is if you're going to go clean slate at quarterback, probably would have made sense to also go clean slate at coaching.
You're going to end up with Will Levis, where he has four different offensive coordinators and four different schemes in
Yep.
4 years.
I mean, that ruined the guy's ability to
We
develop.
talk we have talked about this in the past, like the dead zone that Chicago was in with their coach and their GM and their quarterback situation, like not lining up properly, and
Yep.
how, like, if you're going to stick with the quarterback, then you have to stick with the coach longer, and if you stick with the coach longer, how that is detrimental to the quarterback. And
Yep.
like they're in a bad spot where they're like in kind of limbo, and no matter what choice they make, it's just going to extend futility, and they're a couple years away.
And it goes back to the brilliance of what the Lions did, right? All those three things were aligned the minute they all got in the building. You had your quarterback that they believed in, even if we didn't believe him at the time. They had their general manager and their head coach, all three of those guys tied together, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was all put together. It was all started at the same time, and it made sense. In retrospect, it made sense. I'll openly admit that I thought Goff was a bridge quarterback. I mean, I would say like 80% of people did.
Look, everybody did. And people,
Yeah.
and I know that there are some writers out there that are claiming that they weren't on board with that they were like, oh, I believed in Goff all along. No, you did not. Like like
There were some out there, but it was blind
No.
faith at that point.
No,
That's a
no.
point to me is like, if you're like, oh, I knew from the get-go that Goff was going to work, like that is called blind faith, because let's be honest.
There's some fans that believe that, and I totally get that. But if you're a writer,
Yeah.
and you're claiming that you were, then you're not a good writer. Like, you have to be able to have that balance. And there are guys out there that are saying that, like, oh, I've believed in Goff all along. Okay, no, stop. If you don't, then you lack balance, right? Then you lack that. Like, it was the situation, the way he played, it warranted skepticism.
Sure.
Especially from people who are paid to be analysts, right?
Right.
Like,
The fact that the Lions picked up all those first-round picks is like, of course you have to consider
Yes.
drafting a quarterback.
Yes. If you were a fan and you were 100% behind him because you're 100% behind your fan base, great. That's awesome. But like, I'm sick of these
I told you
analysts
so.
that are trying to
I
pretend.
just don't like the "I told you so" thing in general. I know I've probably been guilty of it in the past, but I just like.
Well, let me tell you, I was right about Za'Darius Smith. So let me talk about that more.
Someone did ask if he's already had his bye week, and the answer is no. The Browns'
No.
bye week is this week.
Yeah,
which
that
we
poor
learned
guy.
in a funny way. Yeah, so he's not going to get a break necessarily. He could play in 18 games here, but we'll see. I mean,
Yeah,
the Lions might be resting their starters in week 18.
could be the longest. Has anyone ever played 24 games?
So, oh God, I
Or
don't know.
23 games, like, in a season?
Yeah, it'd have to be 23.
Yeah, well, if you get the first round bye, right?
I don't know. Probably not. His bye is a wild card. There you go. He gets
That's true.
No, he gets a 2-week bye week because they rest all their starters against the Vikings in the season finale. Is it Vikings again or is it Packers?
Yeah, no, it's Vikings.
Yeah, and then you get the first week bye. So
I don't know. I feel like they're gonna need to win that game for like seeding or something like that. I feel like that could still be a fun. That's
Maybe.
still gonna be a fun game. Yeah, it's gonna be fun to send them home.
Rerun, a $2 super chat, says thoughts on Jack Campbell and how he has progressed. Well, I will say we're going to talk
We have a
about
Jack
Jack
Campbell question.
We do have a Jack
Yeah.
Campbell question.
Yes.
So we'll talk about that shortly here. Any other question that caught your eye? I keep clicking the wrong buttons here. That's a really good question, Ward. I don't know how the pay works for a player that gets traded. So if
He
Za'Darius
gets an
Smith,
extra. He
does
gets a
get-
game check.
from who and at what price and at what rate? You just
It's however many, like, okay,
his
so you take his
salary.
base salary, you divide it by 17 games, but now he gets another 1/17th of what he gets, and I'm sure the
Mm,
Lions will have to pick that up.
oh boy, I wonder if they factored that into the compensation.
Oh no, the 70,000, the
Right,
$70,000 they'll have
his
to pay him.
$1.2 million salary divided by 17.
Yeah, I think they'll be all right.
Um, Dan does tend to give new signees 2 weeks to get acclimated to the new system. Will he play in his first week?
I think
We talked about that earlier, and I think both of us think he will play this week because he's. I mean, it's a little bit different than the other signees because one, he's a veteran. Two, he's a starting level talent. Three, it's a position where you can just say, hey, go get the quarterback. Don't lose contain and go get the quarterback. All right, let's get into the other questions here. We're going to get back into the show itself. Some non Za'Darius Smith questions, and then we'll have some time afterwards to answer more of your questions. Remember that we are still raising money for the Rogal Cancer Center, so !donate if you want to donate there. Get us to do some silly stuff right on our face, whatever you want. All right, let's get back to it. Welcome back to the midweek mailbag, special trade deadline edition. Although we have just finished talking about all the trade deadline stuff, so if you're tuning into us live on Twitch or YouTube, you're gonna have to go rewind. If you're listening to us on the podcast, hopefully you just already heard that. I don't know why you'd be jumping in the middle of a podcast. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's get to some of our other questions here. I'm only interested in answering half of this question just to kind of highlight a rule that has changed now that the trade deadline has passed. Because Zach Spillner asked, are there any vets that could get cut late in the regular season that you would keep an eye on as late additions for a playoff push? Now, the reason I want to bring up a rule here is because any player that is cut now, whether they're a veteran or a non-vested veteran, a guy who only has 1, 2, or 3 seasons under their belt, all of them now are subject to waivers. Every single one of them. And so that means any team can claim him. Any team can go out and get a guy, and the Lions have 31st priority now because of their very good record. So if a team cuts someone that's very good, and I think it's an important thing to bring up. I'm not sure if I could even answer your question anyways, because that's such a hard thing to predict.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to point out that if the Lions still think they need to add talent, waiver wire is not going to be the easiest way to do that with their low priority. I think you could consider what Dan Campbell actually already said. Like, hey, if we strike out on the trade deadline, we're going to poach some practice squads. Mm-hmm. That's how this team is going to add talent from here until the Super Bowl. And that's probably the only way they can do it.
The only kind of like asterisk on that is if a veteran was cut and their salary was outrageous,
right,
to the point that they wouldn't get claimed, they'd pass through waivers. The salary gets wiped, and then he becomes a free agent who can sign with whoever. That could be an outside option, but the chances of that happening, it's pretty slim.
Right. Yeah, because when you claim someone off waivers, you inherit that contract.
Assume their salary. Yep.
All right, next question here from Swag Kazakage asks, Jack Campbell has had a great season, and I don't think it's being talked about enough. He has demonstrated great play and leadership. Has he earned a permanent starting role, as in no rotations?
Yeah, he's the Mike. He's been the Mike. He's going to be the Mike. He is the Mike from now on. They alluded to that in training camp. They opened the season by kind of in week 1 by kind of splitting with Derek Barnes a bit, but by week 2 he was already at 73% of the snaps. Week 3 he had 100% of the snaps. Dipped back down around 70 in weeks 4 and 5, but then it's been back up to 80 and then 95, and last week was 93. So like he is the guy, and that's not going to change. When you look at his PFF numbers, Um, Sometimes those can be skewed early in the season, but now that you have a sample size, 8 games under your belt, he is ninth amongst all linebackers, fifth amongst starting linebackers. His run defense is in the top 10. His coverage grade is in the top five. His tackling grade is in the top five. He is he is playing lights out right now. His run defense and his ability to diagnose and click and close is sensational. You've seen him show up a ton. Fourth down last week, made a big stop. It's been really a light bulb, I think, that has clicked on over the last month or so that he's really like started to separate himself from just being like, oh yeah, he's an improved solid starter to okay, he might be a top five defender on this team right now, maybe top four.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that's missing from his game is just like those big splash plays, right?
Sure.
The tackles for loss, the sacks, the interceptions, the forced fumbles. Like we haven't quite seen those plays yet, but he has been so fundamentally sound that he's still popping off the page, right? He's still getting 10 tackles a game. He's still making sure that, the run defense, as not good as it's been, we haven't seen a ton of explosive plays. A lot of it is being stopped after 4, 5, 6 yards because of the linebacking core, because of Jack Campbell. Dan Campbell talked about him earlier this week on Monday, saying like, sometimes you forget this guy's a young player because he's playing so well, but he's still
Right.
growing. But he's also saying like, he's still developing. Like that's the awesome thing is like this
Mm-hmm.
guy is going to get even better. Those splash plays will probably eventually come because of the awareness, because of the speed in which he'll play it, because the processing is quickening up. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the question's absolutely right in that like we need to be talking about this a little bit more. But I think part of the reason we haven't been talking about it more is because he doesn't have any interceptions. He doesn't. Does he have a forced fumble? He had the forced
That forced
fumble
fumble against
on
DK.
yeah
Yeah.
DK.
Yeah.
That was a
That
while
was,
ago,
I
but yeah,
think, kind of
it was a huge
the
play.
turning point.
Yeah.
Ever since he made that play, he's been very much on my radar. I'll tell you what, a little spoiler. The article that I have coming up for Reacts this week,
Mm-hmm.
we ask a question every week for our React series. Uh, because we're at 8 games, I repurposed what we did at 4 games, which was who's the MVP, offensive MVP, defensive MVP at the halfway mark now. Um, and on defense, it's once again it's going to be Kirby and Brian Branch and Aleem, but with no Aiden Hutchinson, I needed a new guy. And I picked Jake Campbell.
There you go. All right, next question here comes from Mark Fine. Asks, what are your mid-season thoughts on the 2024 draft class? Now, obviously, we don't have a ton to draw on, but we've seen a lot of Terrion, plenty of Terrion. We've seen a little bit of Ennis Rakestraw, only a little bit of Sione Vaki, a relatively good amount of Makai Wingo, and that's about it.
Yeah, I think Arnold is what I expected him to be. I think the instincts are there, the confidence is there, the swagger is there, the athleticism is there. He's going to develop into be a really good corner with a little bit of time, and so I really like where he's at. I know he was tagged with a lot of penalties early in the season, but that's okay.
And we've seen that go away, right?
Yeah, and for the amount of man, like the Lions run more man than anyone in the league
Yeah.
right now. Like
Yep.
they're running man almost half the time, like 46 point something percent, right? They run it more than anybody else, and you put him in a really difficult spot, and I think he's playing well. Ennis is developing. You're moving him. You have him outside now. You have him inside. He hasn't really had the opportunities to see the field, so I think he's still developing. I still like what I see. I think he's a really physical player that will do well in this scheme. Um, yeah, Vaki, I think, is a tremendous special teamer. They thought he was the best special teamer in the draft, and I don't think they're wrong. He's been sensational. Wingo has done better than what I expected. He's playing really well. He looks like the guy who was graded out as like a top 100 player as opposed to a guy that was drafted in the mid to late rounds. And so I'm excited to see what happens with Mahogany as he's now on the roster permanently. We know Manu is going to take some time, but I am I'm I'm satisfied. I know that this draft class was very different than the previous ones because there were more immediacy needs in the previous years, and this year it was just like, hey, we need a corner, and so there hasn't been as many opportunities. But I think the opportunities that Wingo's got, that Vaki's got on special teams, I think they've all cashed in, and so I'm happy, and I think the potential's there for growth. So I'm very satisfied with where they're at.
Yeah, I would say I'm just like, okay, we're on track, right? To me, there's nothing that's like, wow, you hit this one out of the park, but there's also nothing like, oops, you made a mistake there. And that's kind of how you should approach any draft class, 8 games into their careers. But sometimes, like last year, it becomes very apparent when you've hit a home run. Terrion, I think maybe tiny bit below expectations. The struggles have just continued maybe a little bit more, but like you said, like the penalties have started to disappear. There's improvement week to week. It's not perfect every week. Some of the same mistakes are popping up here and there, but in general, it's a steady rise. I think maybe I was hoping he'd be a little bit further along there, but that might have been my own, like, well, the Lions pass rush is going to be good. They got good safeties. Like, it's going to funnel plays to them. But you're very, very right to point out that they're putting him in man. That makes it very, very hard for a young player. And we certainly recognize that there was going to be some bumps and bruises along the way for not only just him, but the entire secondary. And I think that has played out as expected there. And then it's also worth pointing out that it's very hard to get interceptions in man coverage, right? Because you're focused on the player. You are not focused on the quarterback. It's a lot easier to get those interceptions when you're focused on the quarterback, which is why they moved Brian Branch to safety and why their safeties lead the league in interceptions. Like, and so it's going to make your corners look a little bit worse, I think, than maybe they are, because I think Carlton's playing good football, but you'd be hard pressed to find a statistic that shows that he's playing good football. Because I mean, it's just they're put in tough situations, and the one thing that I will say is the pass deflections in the secondary that's the one stat that you can point to. I think the Lions are top 5 in pass deflections, and that's not just like the interceptions, because interceptions count as pass deflection. I think if you even erase the interceptions, they're still a top 10 team in pass deflections. So
I don't think they do count the same. I think they're separate, aren't they?
I thought they were.
Yeah, because
the same, but I don't know.
Because when I was like, for example, I think Kirby has 1 pass deflection, but he has 6 interceptions, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. I guess it depends on which charts you're reading, because defensive stats can be subjective. But I do think that the safeties' improved play could be a correlation of the improved play at corner. Safeties are able to roam the middle a little bit more, play with a little bit more confidence, a little bit more freedom. And I think, maybe we don't attribute that to Terrion, but it could be a fallout from Terrion.
Yeah. And then as for the other, like, everything else to me is TBD, right? Like, Ennis, we've barely seen. Manu, this is exactly what we expected out of his rookie season. Vaki, I know some people may have expected him to have a bigger offensive role. I wasn't one of them.
Don't worry. That fullback wheel route's coming. It's coming.
And then Wingo to me is the one where it's like, oh, this guy's playing above expectation.
Yes.
And that's it. That's kind of where they're at right now. All right, next question here comes from Victor Vasquez. Asks, hypothetically, and I'm glad we're touching on this question, because as soon as the Saints fired their head coach, people are already like, what are we going to do when Aaron Glenn's gone? So let's talk about it. I know we're far away from that conversation actually needing to happen, but it says, hypothetically, if AG were to leave this offseason for the Saints job, do you think Kelvin Shepard is ready for the DC role, or do you think there's someone else that steps in that position?
I think Shepard will be the internal favorite. Like, he would be the guy, if you're looking internally, that you're saying he's definitely going to get an interview. Yeah. If you look externally, I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to say, man, Robert Saleh, wouldn't it be great to have that defense? I can't imagine Robert Saleh coming here to take a defensive coordinator underneath a coach he was in direct competition for to be the head coach of this team. I think that would be a hard pill for him to swallow. Now, he does have family here, so maybe that's incentivizing and he could, be inclined. But I do think, I do agree with you. The Dennis Allen choice makes a ton of sense. You can keep the same scheme. It's the guy who taught AG how to be how to run the scheme that he runs. And so Dennis Allen makes a ton of sense. He could be one of these guys that is a better coordinator than a head coach, which we see all over the place in the
Yeah.
NFL. Head coach is hard. Coordinators, when you're a specialist and just focusing on a coordinator job, it's it makes life a little easier. And if you're good
It's
at
way
it,
different.
you can play. Look at Jim Schwartz, right?
Sure.
Great defensive coordinator, terrible head coach, then great defensive coordinator again for such a long time. Um, and still. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think Dennis Allen would certainly be in the conversation because of familiarity with Dan Campbell, but Shepard, man, he's got there's juice there that's really worth exploring.
Yeah. The only thing with Shep is age, right? Like he hasn't been in the coaching
Sure,
ranks very long. And so
sure.
it'd be a pretty meteoric rise, but in terms of just like players coach, a guy that can rally the troops, a guy that knows how to communicate well and connect to his players, there might not be a better position coach on the team at doing all of those things.
Ooh, Hank Fraley would like a word.
But speaking of
But yeah,
line
no, I agree
coaches,
with you.
like
I agree with
Terrell Williams is another guy that has already been going the rounds of defensive coordinator interviews, and I know he's only been here for a half a season, and that might
Mhm.
put him behind the eight ball in terms of the Lions liking to develop within. So that guy is also a candidate. I also want to go back to AG, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I am not writing him in pen to the Saints at all because
Oh no, is that what
like,
people are doing?
yeah, but they see the
Okay.
like going back to the team that he was at, and they're
Sure.
comfortable with him, and he was a really good coach there, and all those things, and I get that.
Why aren't people writing him to the Jets then? Because the Jets, yeah, he played for the Jets, right? I mean, like you're saying,
That's possible too, but I
a
think
couple opportunities.
those are two teams that went defensive coaches,
Sure.
and a lot of times we know what happens
Oh,
after
they
you go
flip
defensive
it.
coach. They flip it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and what could be a less inspiring, and I'm no shade at Aaron Glenn, but if you are a Saints fan and when you lose Sean Payton, you just hire the team's defensive coordinator as your head coach, and what do you do after you fire him? You fire the guy that was the defensive coach 3 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever. Like that is repeating what you just did, and it's not going to inspire a lot of confidence, I imagine, among Saints fans, even if they like Aaron Glenn a lot. So I'm not ready to push those chips in there.
How bad do you think Saints fans are looking at Dan Campbell and going, "Man, I can't believe we let that guy go"?
I mean,
And then
Dolphins fans felt that way immediately
Yeah. Yeah.
because of Adam Gase, right?
Oh, Adam Gase, my goodness.
Was
You mean
was Adam Gase the one that was fired that led it to Campbell
no? He
being
was
the
after.
interim coach, or he was the one that was hired
He was
instead
after.
of Dan Campbell?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Gase might have been after. I'm trying to remember. I know Gase, former Lions quarterback coach under
Sure.
Jim Bob Cooter.
Yeah. Man, we're really
So.
digging through the old Lions coaches. Last week we were talking about the Braden Coombs.
Do you know Matt Burke, the defensive coordinator of the Texans this week, was a linebackers coach underneath Jim Schwartz?
That's too far back for me. I'm too young. I just wanted to say those words because I haven't said them in 20 years. All right. Last one before we get out of here. This is an interesting one, and I might have to lean on you a little bit more than offering an answer myself. But Tim Bowers asked, with seemingly little change to personnel on offense, what led to the Lions running more outside zone this year?
So one of the misconceptions about the Lions is that they are a gap only type blocking scheme. And they're not. They've always run gap and outside zone. They've always run both, but they've run more gap than what the NFL average was, and therefore they kind of got labeled as like a gap scheme. When really it's just they run. It's kind of like the defense. Like the defense runs. They're a man coverage scheme. They run more man than anyone else. Well, they run man 46% of the time. They run zone 54% of the time. Yet they're called a man team because they run it at a higher rate than normal. It's the same thing with the gap. They ran a lot of gap higher than the NFL average. And so they kind of got tabbed as this gap scheme, but they've always run a lot of outside zone. I think they found success at it a little bit more this year just because Jahmyr Gibbs has found more success everywhere, and
Yeah.
he's a really good gap or really good zone runner. Um, he can do both though. I mean, he can gap, he can do zone, he can do everything. And Monty's the same thing too. Monty, you're seeing more gap calls, Jameer more zone calls. But again, you'll see Monty succeeding in outside zone as well. And so this team will lean on things that are working too. Like
Right.
they'll go into a game and they'll be like, "Hey, this opponent's we're gonna want to stretch them more. We're gonna want more outside zone. There's gonna be other teams where they're lighter on the defensive line. You're gonna run more gap and try and like pin and pull them. And so it really just depends. There's a combination of things that are combining to what's leading to more success in what looks in this in more outside zone.
Yeah, and I think what you just said there at the end is important too. Like let's not try to read too much into small sample sizes, right? I know we're already halfway through the season and maybe that's considered a decent sample size, but so much of what they do, so much of why they're successful is their flexibility, is their ability to come in week to week with completely different game plans, completely different ideas of what they want to do. If they want to run more gap, that's fine. If they want to run more zone, that's fine. If they want to throw 40 times, that's fine. If they want to run 50 times, they can do all of that. That's why they're so successful on offense, is because they come in so unpredictable. And I think there's a reason why the Lions have also been very, very good this year early in football games, because you don't know what they're going to come at you with. You just don't. And I mean, part of they just have a good offense. So of course they're good in the first quarter because they're good in every quarter. But I think a lot of times they're catching teams off a little bit because they can do so many different things and you don't know what it's going to look like right away.
The offensive line, everyone talks about how great they are. And I think this may be one of the things that's most underrated about them, is because yes, they're athletic. Yes, they execute their blocks. Yes, they're tremendous with their technique, but they can transition between blocking schemes and they play at a high level in both blocking schemes as well as pass protection. It's not like some offensive lines, you're going to look at them and you're going to be like, oh, they're really good at pass protection, but their run is a little bad. Or, hey, they can outside zone, but they can't gap. And so you don't have to worry about power. You just have to be able to move laterally. And so with the Lions offensive line, what makes them good and really what like separates them from all the other offensive lines is that they can do all of it and at a high level. And that's why they're the best offensive line in football.
And now they can pass rush again on defense, so they can literally do everything. They've got a perfect team.
All right. I'm going to I'll book my New Orleans tickets right now.
That's right. I heard tickets are like at $5,000.
Dude, I was sending you screenshots of the hotel prices like the other day.
You were. All right. Now that we're, the Lions are Super Bowl favorites according to DVOA. I think it's time to get out of here.
Not just DVOA. ESPN's analytics have it that as well.
Vegas hasn't caught up yet, though. Vegas is still riding the Chiefs.
That's because that's people like to bet on, right?
True.
So
True.
Gotta factor that in.
But here's the thing: the Detroit versus everyone, like that's not going to fly much longer because people are definitely starting to notice Detroit. People are. I mean, listen, we did our our power rankings roundup, and we always have the same 9 power rankings that we look at.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry to say those that want to play the disrespect card, but 5 out of those 9 have now have the Detroit Lions as their number 1 team.
And probably another dozen that we don't include all have them number 1 as well.
Right.
And but I don't think there's always going to be fuel because the other NFC teams and their fan bases just hate us. and so that is just fuel to the fire, and just like you can hydrate yourself with the tears from Packers fans last weekend. Like, it's amazing. And the Vikings fans that were crying about the Lions beating the Packers was just icing on the cake. Just icing on the cake. And I'm here for it. I want all of their tears.
There is something, though, that I feel like we shouldn't overlook, and it's in the opposite direction. It's the amount of respect that the Lions are getting, because I think to be considered the top team in the NFL over the Kansas City Chiefs, the defending champions, the defending champions who are still undefeated, you must be playing some pretty damn good football if people think you're better than that team.
Just
if
listen
most people think you're better than that team.
Yeah, just listen. Just listen to the analysts on the Monday morning shows that are out there talking about the Lions snatch your soul and then you can't recover. Like they take your soul from in the first quarter and then it takes you 6 quarters before you can get your bearings back. Like it's like they beat you so many ways. They're so deep. They're so talented. It is a absolute joy. I hope every Lions fan is soaking in every minute of this season because it is joyous.
And now they got Za'Darius Smith on top of it. We'll call it there. Thank you all for listening to the midweek mailbag. As a reminder, if you missed First Bite, it is coming back as a live entity starting this week. Don't have a date yet for it, a day or a time, but be on the lookout on our YouTube and Twitch pages if you want to catch those live. They will only be available live or on Pride of Detroit Direct. If you're a Pride of Detroit Direct subscriber, you can go to prideofdetroit.com/subscribe if you want to be part of those and get all of the First Bites. We've been doing them all year, but they've just been part of those newsletters. So if you're interested, you could always reach out to me to learn more about Pride of Detroit Direct. But until next time, I'm Jeremy. That's Erik. Thank you all for listening. It's chaos. Be kind.
Recording stopped.
Okay. We got about 10 minutes here where we can hang out, answer some questions, catch up on alerts, all that fun stuff. Nick the 100 Bit says, thank you so much for pulling me away from totally useless and anxiety-inducing election coverage. Genius move. Oh, That's happening tonight? Didn't realize it.
I've only seen trade deadline and podcast. That's it.
For a second during this podcast, I pulled up Twitter and I saw something and I immediately turned off. I'm like, nope, I'm not getting sucked down this right now. Monkey81, thank you for the 20 months subscribe to the channel, says happy Movember, everybody. Thanks guys for what you do. Appreciate you. Yeah, okay, yeah. I wanted to talk about this, but we didn't get an opportunity and I didn't feel the opportunity to bring it up. But yeah, so there are some character things with Za'Darius Smith that have popped up from fans of previous teams. Now, okay. I looked a little bit into this because I was curious, like, what does that mean? Is this sour grapes from fans that, he shunned or, crapped on or whatever?
Yes, it is. Thanks for coming to the show, everyone.
I mean, it kind of is, to be quite honest. So, like, here's how it went down with both the Packers and the Vikings. He plays amazing for the Packers. He's putting up crazy numbers. They adjust his contract to he's looking for an extension. They adjust his contract in a way that lessens his cap hit now, increases it into the future, which basically tells him, hey, we're not keeping you around. Like, we're going to set up a ballooned cap hit next year. We're cutting you. Like, that has been made very clear to him indirectly. And so he knows it. He puts up a little bit of a shit fit. He doesn't get voted captain the next year and gets upset about that. And then, like, he bought, like, a chromed out, like, C necklace. I don't know. It was kind of weird. So, like, it all kind of went sour because he wasn't getting paid. And then he goes to Minnesota, signs an extremely, extremely, extremely team-friendly 3-year deal. And then he produces, and for the first half of the season, he deals with an injury for most of the second half of the season. And he wants a little bit more assurance in his contract. He's getting upset. Doesn't work out, they cut him.
They trade him.
That's right.
Trade him.
They trade him. And I believe with the Packers, I can't remember if it was the Packers or the Vikings or maybe both. Like, he talked a little shit about him after he left. Because for one clear reason, like, he didn't feel like he was being respected. He talked about how no one was, asking him if he was okay when he was dealing with a back injury a few years back. He didn't feel like his contributions were being financially supported. And so, like, he didn't like those organizations. Now, I through the research that I did, other than the weird captain thing, I don't think there was a thing I saw that was like he's a bad teammate. He was a 2-time captain in Green Bay. And when I asked the Browns writer that we talked to in our 5 questions thing, he said, we heard the character concern things. We have not experienced it at all in a year and a half in Cleveland. Like, he has been a model citizen. He's been a guy that people have rallied around. He's been a guy that can rally the troops. He's loud. He's outspoken. I mean, we all heard what he said 3 weeks ago, and he's like, yeah, I'd love to play for Detroit. Like, that's an outspoken thing that not a lot of players would say publicly, right? But I don't think that's being disrespectful to Cleveland. If you saw the full quotes, he's like, listen, I want to stay here. I want to fight through all this adversity and stay here. But yeah, it'd be fun to play in Detroit. So, like, he's kind of like, to me, it's like a much less combative CJ Gardner-Johnson, in that when he leaves and feels disrespected, he's going to say those things. He is not going to shy away from saying those things, but he's not going to stir shit just to stir shit. Like, he's not a distraction from what I've heard.
CJ was a character.
CJ was a character.
I have the best CJ story, but I can never share it, I don't think.
No?
Maybe.
Maybe. It's a good CJ story. I think it's a good one. It's not. I just think
it's funny.
Looks like we got
He's a character.
He's very much character. Another $50 donation from Alex N. Thank you so much, Alex. Appreciate you. No message, but that's all good. And I will say again, if you aren't aware of the things that you can do with your donations, go to pridetrade.com, because you can do, like, if you donate $50 and you tell me in the message, hey, right, punters are important. Great. Or something, I'll write that on my forehead.
You better write punters are important. Jack Fox may be helping you out.
That's part of the fun in me doing that, is that I get embarrassed for all the shit talking I say about punting and punters. Having him embarrass me is the fun part.
I would love for him to just, like, line drive one. Right, just a line.
I literally told him,
no,
like,
arc, no.
Don't take it easy on me. Don't give me end over ends. Give me whatever. I've also been told that I have to wear a helmet, which makes sense because I would prefer not to break my nose.
You're gonna do a helmet when fielding punts?
I have to.
No,
they won't let me do it if I don't.
For real?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
That's hilarious.
I mean, if you took a Jack Fox punt off the face, like, you're gonna need reconstructive surgery. You know how high that ball goes?
Yeah.
A lot higher than when we were getting them out of the jugs machine.
Yeah, I do remember you catching one up here too. So that's, maybe I should be a little bit more worried for you. I mean, are they going to reinforce your fingers? They can put, like, splints on your fingers so you don't break a finger. That's what I'm.
Nah. That's a skill issue. I got that.
Yeah, a skill that you've executed before. You've broken your fingers before.
Okay, no, but that's different.
By trying to catch a ball barehanded.
That's some, beer league guy thinking he can still make it in the pros, trying to rifle a ball from right field into second base.
And you tried to catch it with your bare hand. So
yeah, baseballs aren't meant to be caught with your bare hands. Footballs are always caught with bare hands.
If you think a Jack Fox punt is going to break your face and you think your fingers are going to be okay,
I'm catching it like this. It was a
line
drive throw. No, you don't get it.
I don't get it. Just tell me which doctor you want to go to. Which I will look. You already have him on call, right? Like, you already have. Which doctor is it that you already have? He already has your medical records that you will want to go to again. It's important.
I don't like this conversation.
I'm legitimately more worried about your hands than I am your face.
I'm not even close to worried about my fingers.
Oh, all right.
The trajectory is way different. That's
From the sound of it, though, it's still coming down at you.
sure. Yeah,
All right.
I can catch a football like that.
How's your? Do you have you don't have osteoporosis or anything, right? Like it's not like your forearms are going to break or something like that with the ball
Come on.
comes
No,
down.
I drink milk. It's fine.
Is that enough? Like Jim Harbaugh levels of milk, or like regular
No.
people levels of milk?
And Andy Benoit levels of milk.
Oh gosh.
That's a deep cut.
Yeah.
Um,
But yeah, if you do break your fingers, it is awfully hard to type. When
Oh,
I
yeah.
broke my pinky, I had to relearn how to type
what?
very quickly.
You're
It was
talking to
terrible.
someone who broke their pinky 2 years. Like I know.
No, I'm talking to the chat.
Oh,
They said it's hard to type.
thought you
Caitlin
were.
said it.
I thought you were trying to lecture me.
No, but I should. Let's go. I mean, do you want to revisit that? I still sometimes type like I'm sipping tea because like I'm
Pinky's out.
Yeah.
We had a long conversation on the last podcast about whether thumbs should be out in certain situations where maybe you're pointing to a crowd in a certain way. Do you have your thumbs out when you do it or not?
What? I don't know that one.
There was a certain player that was giving a sign to
with your thumbs.
Do you?
Yeah,
well,
I like that.
Do
I
you
like
do
to
it
have
with the
them
thumbs
right
out?
in the middle. I like to have them right in the middle, and then straight up. Yes, I like. I often will sometimes put 3 of them up, and then ask them to read between the lines.
Oh, okay. No, but like if you look at the picture of Brian Branch, his thumbs are out when he's doing it, and then
That's
they
great.
do a whole discussion of like, okay, do you also go pinky out? That's kind of hard to do.
I'm not going to tell Brian Branch how to do anything. He does whatever he does is now the new way that we do things. That is now the way that I am going to do. When someone cuts me off in traffic, they're getting the thumbs out. That's what's going to happen.
There you go. Andrew Sugg over on YouTube asks, Jeremy, can you please remind me of 2 things? I couldn't get either one right. How to use my Prime membership each month to subscribe on Twitch, which I don't use. How to not miss First Bite on YouTube. Okay. So if you want to subscribe to us on Twitch and using your Twitch Prime, you have to sign up on Twitch, free account on Twitch. You have to go into your settings and integrations or account somethings where you log into your Amazon. You have to have an Amazon Prime account. So if you have Amazon Prime, you link that to your Twitch account somewhere in your Twitch settings, and then you hit the subscribe button on the Twitch page, on our Twitch page. You scroll down and it'll say use Prime Gaming or something. It'll have a little check mark box. In fact, I could probably show you how to do it right now because I highly doubt I'm using my Twitch Prime right now. I just realized I'm typing on my laptop keyboard. Here, I'll show you really quick. Let's, I don't know who's someone. We'll just, the sports leader. Let's pretend I want to sub to them.
Dance around your ankles,
Oh my gosh.
I don't know what's happening. Oh, they're not. Can I? I can't even sub to them. Hold on, we'll just.
This is a great tutorial.
This guy's playing guitar. Relax. Resubscribe. Boom. Use your Prime sub. Right there. Subscribe for free. That's how you do it. So I already have my Twitch Prime, or my Amazon Prime link to my account. But that's what you do. Just hit the subscribe button. Click that box and then subscribe. And it's free. That's it. As for watching First Bite. That's the wrong button. So I'll try to put out an alert on Twitter ahead of time of when we'll be going live. But you'll just have to watch us live. It's as simple as that. It'll happen either tomorrow night or Thursday night. I've not booked a guest yet. I've reached out to 2 different people and have not gotten responses, probably because it's a crazy day and I wouldn't expect quick responses. And then so that's the way you can catch us live on YouTube or Twitch. If you want to make sure you don't miss us anytime, because we're only going live during the month of November so that we can raise more money. The rest of the season, those are just Pride of Detroit direct videos. So that's our newsletter. We drop a newsletter 3 times a week. We do a post-game newsletter with Erik and I where we do a live video, or we do a video either from Ford Field or through a Zoom call. I write something for that newsletter as well. So does Brett Whitefield of Fantasy Points. I do a recap. That is the recap video, or the recap newsletter. Ty Schalter does a midweek kind of analysis opinion column that'll be dropping probably tomorrow, for those wondering. And then we do a preview one, and the preview one has First Bite in it. It has a column in it, and it's also had a one-on-one interview with a Lions player every week so far in it that I've done. So if you want that, that's Pride of Detroit Direct. It's $50 a year to do it, to sign up. You go to prideofdetroit.com/subscribe if you want that. It's a whole bunch of, that's right. Or if you donate $100 to our campaign, at the end of the month, we will send you a code that will get you a subscription all the way through next year's training camp. Good catch there. So you can either just pay $50 or pay $100 to charity. Either way, you'll get subscribed. You'll get access to all of First Bites. So the First Bite that we're recording today, or this week, will be streamed live on YouTube and Twitch. After it's over, it will not be available on YouTube and Twitch, but it'll be available the next morning, or it'll be available Friday morning in the newsletter, if that all makes sense. Okay. I think I explained that good enough. Thank you for the $10, Andrew.
You have a heart out right now, by the way.
Oh my God, Jesus. I got to go. I'm sorry. We got to really go. All right, guys, you've been awesome. We'll be live again for First Bite and for the Purview podcast. But yeah, I definitely got to go. Thank you for catching that. Appreciate y'all. Thanks for all the donations. Go enjoy the rest of your night if you can, or just go to bed.